this computer. So Courtney, feel free to mute and hide yourself. And there's Courtney. Okay.
Is my hair okay?
Video.
Is this where I do my interpretive dance?
All right, so I'm going to mute myself. Colin, feel free to start your introduction when I'm muted.
Hello, everyone. I'm Colin Fogarty, Executive Director of Confluence, and the mission of Confluence is to connect people with the history, with the living cultures, and with the ecology of the Columbia River system through Indigenous voices. And we're so honored and pleased and happy to have two guests with us today, Emily Washines and Josiah Pinkham, who were scheduled to do an in-person Confluence story gathering with us in Walla Walla, and complications arose and we have to take that online. So we're so glad to be doing that today online, and thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Emily and Josiah to introduce themselves and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Colin. It's so great to be here. I don't know if Josiah wants to go first or you want me to go first.
Go ahead, you can go first.
So I'm an enrolled member of the Yakama Nation, and I currently live on the Yakama Reservation with my husband and 3 children. So that's where I'm streaming to you today, behind, with my deer wall behind me. That's what we call that. And, you know, really glad to be here today because for some of you that don't know, Josiah and I are very closely related. And this is our first video conference together. And so we're hoping to bring some good messages to you today.
All right. And my name is Josiah Black Eagle Pinkham, and I'm a member of the Nez Perce tribe. I was raised on my reservation here in north central Idaho. And I'm the father of 2 sons, and I work in the Nez Perce Tribe Cultural Resource Program, basically to interface between the Nez Perce tribal membership, its governmental structure, and outside entities that manage sacred areas and with Nez Perce interests and Nez Perce values. So I'm very thankful to be here with my sister Emily and participate in this video conference. Thank you.
Yay.
Cool.
So when you had mentioned where you're at, I know that we have a video of our nephew dancing in Idaho next to you, and I wanted to really start this this Confluence gathering with that because I think it brings so much energy and power to it. JJ Maninik is a fancy dancer, and he decided to record something as a part of a social distance powwow. Right now, our people are not gathering and we're adhering to social distancing, so we aren't having our powwows, a lot of which are have been either rescheduled or canceled or up in the air, but there's still this part of people that want to bring that energy forward, and I think he did so with such a great message, and we'll go ahead and see if we can play it for you today.
Hopefully make you smile and hello. Indian name's the Chumliken, from Yakama, Nez Perce, living in Lenore, Idaho. And hopefully all staying home, staying safe, wash your hands, hopefully make you smile and entertain you a little bit. Enjoy.
That's awesome.
So So again, that's JJ Maninik. His name, Indian name, as he mentioned, was Dichum Laikin. He's Yakima Nez Perce from Lenore, Idaho. He's had shared a message that he's representing his brother and sister that passed away a number of years ago. And, you know, he shared this message with such power and grace, if I'm allowed to say that, alongside this, you know, message of like, I'm here with you. I've lost people. If you're in a circumstance and aspect right now where you're losing someone or you have a sense of grief or anxiety, this stance is for you. And I just thought that was so powerful to bring that message forward to anybody that might be losing somebody, or obviously some people are in hospitals and they're not able to be with their loved ones because of everything that's going on right now. And I also wanted to turn this over to Josiah to explain a little bit more about the setting. He's at Clearwater Casino, and the Sleeping Chief is in the background. So I don't know if Josiah can share a little bit more about that.
Okay, so where Johnson is dancing is let's see, well, of course, I have to begin by saying that, you know, the Nez Perce, like many other tribal people, always say that we've been here since time immemorial or time beyond memory, but archaeological evidence pushes that date back, and it keeps getting farther and farther. But that site where he's dancing is, I think, listed at about 9,000 years. And so it's interesting to see that connectivity both in time and place, because that's one of the oldest places where it's recognized as a village site for Nez Perce people, but also the time frame in which it stretches back into. And so, you know, that blood is still, you know, walking the land, and it's great that he carries that message of connectivity both to his ancestral roots and the people that are there suffering with him. And one of the things that he carries is the loss of his brother and sister. There are three of them, and you know, he's the surviving one. And so he carries on and always tries to, you know, mention that message of grief and suffering that he carries in a positive way. And I think that that's a really powerful lesson to remember in today's day and age, because, you know, we're being separated from one another to carry on our lives in our own way that we can. And he's recognizing that, and he's expressing it through dance. And I think that's just a really powerful, positive message to be expressing there in a land where, you know, there's that ancient connection and, you know, the progressive attitude that he carries. So I'm thankful that he's able to do that. And there are many sites there in that within close vicinity of where he's dancing, numerous story sites. Because of its age, you know, it's emerged as a central area for Nez Perce people because of the prevalence of not only village activity, but also the connectedness with story. And there are probably too many stories in that area to go through here, but there's one story about a frog there that turned to stone. And then of course, what is in the background of where Johnson J is dancing is called Kutainomiats in Nez Perce, and that's the elbow child, but it has to do with a story about Coyote going upriver, and he develops this sore on his arm, and you know, he, against the guidance of you know, his family, he basically continues to bother that sore on his elbow, and it grows and it grows and eventually becomes a child that pops out. And you know, he as a man doesn't know how to take care of that child, and so he entrusts it to basically some sisters that tend to it for him. And what happens is, you know, he warns those sisters, you know, don't always be tickling my baby. You guys got to let him rest. And they go against his guidance, and you know, eventually they tickle his baby to the point where, you know, they're throwing it back and forth, and this baby is just, you know, with all glee going through the air, laughing and chuckling as it lands in the hands and arms of another sister, and it goes back and forth like that, until eventually, you know, they throw it up into the air, and this baby lands in the arms of the youngest one, and unfortunately that baby is dead. And Coyote just loses it. He's distraught, walking back and forth. Nobody's gonna know that I had a baby. They're gonna, this child would have grown up to be a great leader and taken care of the people. He's just, going back and forth, casting about like that. And eventually he puts that baby up on the hillside, and he puts the leader's headdress on it, the eagle feather headdress that's well known. And they call that place Katsainomiats now, and you can see the profile of Coyote's child up there. And so, I think it's really difficult for some people to interpret that story, but what it has to do with is, there is such a thing as having too much fun. There is such a thing as not messing around with complex systems, and that's what I bring away from this story. In numerous instances, I reflect on my stories, because that's how I basically am taught to live in this world. And there are things that we can't play with, because we can't do these things just for us. We have to carry this for something greater than ourselves. So I think that's what's reflected through this story, and how that connects to what Johnson Jay is going through. He's not just carrying this grief for himself. He's trying to serve as an example of how to encounter this challenge that he's going through, and that's what he's trying to remind us about, is that we can't go through this life just for ourselves, and we got to remember others. So that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so powerful to have these, be able to be reminded of these stories that people have shared, family members have shared, and be able to look up and see that. And I think it might be true for you, but it's also true for myself, that there's different points in my life where I look at the same thing and it brings a different message, and it brings a different level of clarity. And when I heard you talking about, not playing around with certain things, and, having to be serious to some regard and degree. I mean, it's so much the pulse that's happening right now. I mean, there's a part of us that we're a community orientated people. We're tribally orientated people, and we want to be with our tribal members and people in celebration and birthdays. And, having to adhere to a strict standard is difficult. There's a grief to that. There's a loss to that, even if we're still around. And in your presentations before, I heard you talk about the power of having these culturally significant things that connect to our stories and our livelihoods here for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you explaining and detailing that out. Another aspect of that is also being able to not only look at landforms, but also what else is around us. Stars, for example.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah, I know that you've talked about the aspect of when you're feeling super anxious, when our people are not sure where to go, and we're looking to be guided, we have looked up. And I wanted to see if you had more to add to that about what the stars bring to our people.
Okay, so let's see. There's an old teaching that I remember hearing about in different ways, where they say, if your heart's heavy, go out and lift your eyes to the heavens, and go out and lift your eyes to the sky. And our people have been constantly doing that, and there's a story about why that's significant. And one of the things that comes to mind is the asterism, which you recognize on screen right now. But the Nez Perce have a story, and this story is told by other people. It's told all the way down the Columbia River, and it has been for thousands and thousands of years. But Coyote tricked these wolf brothers into going into the sky, and he marooned them up there because they were in awe. They were looking down at the ground, and these wolf brothers were looking and saying and remarking about, oh, you can see all the way into buffalo country, which is now Montana, and you can see all the way down the Columbia River where we fish. And they were just in awe. And Coyote, he snuck away and he marooned them up there with 2 grizzly bears. And those 2 grizzly bears are to the right-hand side of the image, and they point at what's called in Nez Perce, Lukut Simai. And Lukut means something that shakes or shimmies, and Simai means to be without it. So they're looking at the thing that's unmoving. And see, Coyote, he was back down on the ground, and he looked up there at what he had made, and he said, this will be for the new people when they come. They'll look at that and they'll know how to travel, and they'll know how to come back home. And so what he was expressing was the idea of how people utilize those things for travel. See, because there's a time when Nez Perce people were so young in their cultural lives, in their evolution, that they didn't know the homeland that they encompass now. And they had to utilize that in order to travel to these places to get to where they needed to be, to gather foods and take care of one another. And then they would utilize that same star pattern, that asterism, to get back, until they got to know, where the different mountains and rivers were, where these locations, all these place names came to be. And they also used it to travel out to get to know Buffalo Country in what's now Montana. And it was always that star that helped them to get to know their homeland. And the deeper teaching of that asterism, and in particular that star, is that that's what the people used to travel out to these different places. And the people throughout time experienced all manner of different trips. There were good trips and bad trips and everything you can imagine in between. But the same way that the people traveled out to get to know their homeland is the same way that our mind travels. And so every day brings challenge, and your mind is presented with all these different problems that you're going to encounter. And the same way that the people throughout time had the ability to come back home is the same option that your mind has in encountering all these challenges that it's going to face throughout the day and throughout, your year and your life. And so it's important for us to know exactly where our home point is for our mental health, because we have the option to bring our mind back home from all these various trips called anger and frustration, and even the good ones. Because having that central place for your mind is called that sense of peace, that inner peace that is always there for you to help you to encounter these things that you're going to go through in life. And so this story presents executive function. It gives us a coping mechanism, and it fosters resilience that has empowered our people to survive in this particular area of the world for the thousands of generations that we've been here. So these stories, they're entertainment for the young, and they're even entertainment for me. But without their constant presence in my life, I wouldn't be where I'm at. And without their constant presence in the lives of our people in the past, we wouldn't be where we're at. And so you cast that thinking forward, and you remember that, thousands of years into the future from now, our people are still going to be here, and hopefully will be empowered with the presence of our stories and our songs and our teachings to basically convey who we are.
Mm-hmm. It's so powerful to share in that that teaching. And it's interesting that when I heard this from you a few years ago, if I were to be asked about that, what does the star mean? What does this Big Dipper mean? I wouldn't have been able to answer. But as you spoke that time, when we were giving a federal training, it was like this song was playing and I could kind of rehearse the words to. And I thought, why is it like that? When I was thinking about bringing this forward and what it might mean to the people, I thought about this aspect of, in this teaching and how we teach our children, sometimes certain things come through and they hold it. Sometimes they get bits and pieces of it. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's important, we both have children, and being able to teach and have different points that we're reinstilling this information about our teachings, our stories, neighboring tribe stories. and trying to ingrain that in them, but also having a patience with it as well, knowing sometimes they might fall asleep in the middle of it. They might not be at a level where they feel comfortable in teaching it, and but really giving this as a tool for our people, that saying that this is something that you can do. The sky and this message and these are ingrained within you. I know, there's many times where I've gone out and just stared at the stars, and it brings something. So I appreciate you having that message and strength and connection point between the past and present.
Well, thank you.
It's so powerful, because there's so many different things that we can read about mental health, about things to do, and what are our own teachings, what are our own stories that connect to that strength and that resilience, and to make sure that we're living a good life and having it available. You said where we're at today, but you were very much a part of our traditional wedding trade. A lot of people might not know that our people have weddings and wedding trades. And when I was going to get married, my now husband approached you and said, I would like to make Sheptachai, and I'll let you do the Nez Perce pronunciation after. But
Okay.
And so he traveled over to make that with you, and we've continued to make this throughout our lives here. This parfleche is also, in English, is called parfleche, but we also made this for our daughter's name giving. This is envelopes, and then we made little we just had so much extra space, and we wanted to keep painting with this, so we made little hearts, and I think we did hair ties, or we put them in actually framed 3D glass for the grandparents. And being able to have those, being able to paint with the same materials and methods that our elders have before is something that, again, is another strong connection point. And it's something that we've, again, used for our wedding trade, something that my husband made, or my, I guess, fiance, if we go French, made with you. There he is. Before our traditional wedding, my husband cut his hair, and we always laugh about that. I'm like, why did you? This is the time to have long hair. But he was about 25, so that was his mid-25 life thing that he decided to do. But this is right outside your place there, and I just want to turn it over to you to talk more about this, and also give the Nez Perce pronunciation.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is John with a string of Isopticai that he had made, and it's pretty good hard work, but it was fun work because obviously my good friend and now brother-in-law was joining in with the experience and helping out. But it was an honor to be a part of that experience and to share that with him. And those are classic designs for Plateau people. And the Isopticai word breaks down into two components, and it's basically it loosely translates to a skin to put things in. And these things were utilized in pairs for horseback travel, and everything and anything went into them, food and clothing and trade materials, whatever you needed for your life basically went into those. And from what I understand, when these were made for wedding trades, the wedding trade is what basically recognized the marriage. That was the close of the ceremony and recognized that union. And so when these things were made, they were made in pairs because that's how you put them on a horse, and that's to keep the balance between the shift in the movement of the horse, so that they don't fall off. And oftentimes these were recognized as in wedding trades, these contain the food items that were men's responsibility. So things like dried fish and dried meat, while the beaded bags and the cornhusk bags contained food items and things that were women's responsibility, such as roots and dried roots and berries and that kind of thing. And so you can see that the plateau culture of ambilineality, the value for ambilineality is reflected through that ritual exchange, because it was both men and women that, or it was usually women that participated in this, but it was always with respect to exchange of men, of foods and items that were both men's and women's responsibility. And so one important thing that I might mention about plateau cultures up and down the Columbia River, including the Nez Perce, is that ambilineality means that both the responsibilities of men and women are honored equally. And that's something that is really important to call out, especially in today's day and age where things are kind of shifting back and forth. Plateau people have always been cautious about recognizing the efforts and responsibilities of both men and women. That's a powerful thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you mentioned the men's items being in there, I had just gotten this flashback to our little bridesmaids and things. They were just, he was actually putting the jerky and the men's items inside of the sheptakai, and he looked up, and all his little nieces and nephews, he had given one a little piece. Then the next time he was getting busy and he was doing stuff, and he looked up and they were all a little circle. Can we have you too? So they knew where the goods were. They let their friends know, and their brothers and sisters know, like, there's turkey over there, we need to go. So that's always one of our favorite memories.
That's awesome.
About the kids going. But yeah, the power of being able to unite families, and this message that it's not only just about uniting you as people, it's about uniting your entire families is another aspect of that. And being able to have a wedding that incorporated our culture was something that I had always dreamed of. That I wanted to, one of my biggest dreams was to have a family. I want to have a husband. I want to have children. I want to raise and instill and teach things, and have them teach me things, which they make sure to do every single day.
Oh, yeah.
And wearing this the traditional wedding veil that was made by my mother, with different items that were collected throughout my life. On the very far corners, you can see little tiny baskets, and incorporating different elements within this veil that have been there for a long time. A lot of people, when they first look at some of our veils, they might think, why are there those coins on there? Why do you use dentalium shells? These were status symbols. These were items that when you could see that they have them and they're wearing them, the brides, that there was a lot of care and status held with that, and being a matriarchal society. And so a lot of times where you could go and access foods was held by the women's family. There was a lot of strength and knowledge there. And sometimes, they wouldn't know each other traditionally and historically. There's been also accounts of sometimes when they would join together back in the day in traditional wedding ceremonies, the women had a lot of choice. So even though it could be an arranged marriage and there was families coming together, how it's been described to me from some Yakimas is that they would, the bridesmaids would sometimes wear veils as well, because they would show a picture of that. And they would say, well, because the woman had so much choice, they could say like, no, don't want to do that, don't want to move forward. But everybody would already had been gathered together. So they, well, what about you? What about you? So I had always remembered that story from Patricia Ike, she passed away. And when I had my bridesmaids, one of them was his cousin. So I was like, well, he's not going to marry her. We're not going to have them wear veils. But, being able to incorporate so many different aspects within our wedding is so much a symbol of strength for us and our family. And it, something that we continued on to our daughter's name giving. JD and I haven't been able to make the what we call paint cookies, the traditional paint system yet on our own or by ourselves. And when we're giving our daughters their names, I remember he had called and he's like, all right, I'm gonna try to do it. I'm trying to move forward. And he came back and he had said, well, I called Jay and he's just sending it. So I don't know, maybe I'm not at the level of making it yet. We always laugh about that because we think, oh, you haven't reached that status. He's just like, oh gosh, I'm going to send it to you. But, now looking back at it with having toddlers and everything else, I don't even see how we would fit it in. So it's always been such a great, been a great comfort to just know that we have family members that can support us that way, even from afar, and in preparation for things. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, where does this knowledge come from? Where do we, this aspect of keeping your hands busy, of this teaching of making beautiful things, and we, in our family, always think of our Grandma Elsie.
Yeah. And I think that for me, in growing up with the people that I was surrounded by, all the elders that I had the honor of being blessed by their presence, I think that the reason why I strive to learn what I can is because they inspire me with their sense of responsibility. These are people of responsibility, not just to themselves, to their spouses, to their children and grandchildren, but these are people that honor responsibility to endless things. And they feel that they're responsible for things that they can't even really conceive of connection to. And the reason why that's so powerful for me as a member of an indigenous society is that I have to remember to push that sense of responsibility as far as I can, to take care of much as I can. And that's what I saw in my grandfolks, Grandma Elsie included. She was constantly busy making things because she knew that her life on this in this place was limited, and she had to busy her hands, busy herself to make things for her grandkids that she wouldn't see. And you and I are blessed with things that we could pass on to our younger people and say, this is what came from your Grandma Elsie. And eventually her name will be lost in time, much like her predecessors. And she's not concerned about that. What she's concerned about is not making a name for herself, but contributing to something that's greater than herself. And that's what I feel is important, is that I constantly learn what I can, be as curious about the world as I can, so that I can interpret these things and pass them on. And eventually, my name will be lost to time as well. But the teachings are what matter, and expressing the values that we share for, the things that are important and contributing to our lifestyle. So that's what I saw in it.
And being able to have these photos of our relatives, even just sewing. Like, I didn't think about how much I miss just seeing them active, alongside even photos of them, dressed in regalia and on horseback. But just, I want that snapshot of that activity. It's so important. And here she is on horseback.
Yeah. Wow.
And she could bead a lot of things. She the items that she wasn't as skilled in making, which she knew so many different numerous things to make and do, even in the back of the station wagon, cutting out a wing dress on the way to a powwow. She could hand sew and bead. she would also trade for different things as well. And we had talked about the wedding trade, and she had traded a bag. My parents, when they got married, it was a very small, short, brief ceremony, and they were with child as well. And so in our ways, the child is the trade from the man's side. So in some families. and so Grandma Elsie brought forward a bag to trade with my Ella, my other side, my dad's mother. And there's always been kind of an ongoing discussion about that, whether or not, my Ella traded back. But when I was thinking about that, that was considered the trade, because historically, when we had some of these traditional wedding ceremonies, from the accounts that I hear, is that sometimes it wouldn't work out. And when it was a time when there was before infants and children, they could go their separate ways. So there could be like this aspect of divorce and separation. But once there was a child that was introduced, and a very young infant, it was more of a solidification. And so kind of growing and learning about this added to the whole discussion of, was there an actual trade? How did that happen? Did she trade back? But, being able to look at the things that she prepared for, being able to have my first beading lessons from the beads that were on her carpet. I mean, that was a treasure to me, just to walk in and just to hear her voice and hear her talking, and, just to be able to look at the beads and then to have her hand me a string and have that sense of belief. And, when you talked about our elder, and all of our, numerous teachers and our elders that have and carry so many of these traditions, and there's also this aspect and special relationship between the youth, the words that are used for them. And what I carry with me to this day is that she believed in me. She believed that I could make something very beautiful from that. And it's a very special relationship and bond that even carries through in our language. I think you've talked about this before, about how those words are interchangeable. So I don't know if you want to.
Oh yeah, the reciprocity of our family terms. So like in Nez Perce, Kata is your maternal grandmother, and that's the same term that the maternal grandmother would use to refer to her maternal grandchildren. And so the reverence and the respect that we have for our old people is also reflected on our young people, because what we're doing is as we learn and grow, we're training the younger ones to take our place. And so there's never an end to basically your development and your learning experience. You're always supposed to be pushing yourself to be that next level. And that's why, we have such reverence for our old people, is that, we look at them as really the carriers of the teachings, or the embodiments of the values that we're supposed to grow to inherit. And it's like a constant push to learn more and grow more and be like them, really.
Yeah. I in the Yakima dialect, it's Kathla and Tilla and your Allah and Pusha. And those are, to have those interchangeable, think about if governor were interchangeable with a child. Think about if president was interchangeable with a child, that they themselves can only call each other by that name. Yep. So, it's a very special and unique status title to be able to have and hold and pass along. And I love that message that you just shared about, we're always striving, to increase and be better, and to think about how we can in turn pass it along. Yeah. Her teachings live on through everybody that she taught, including us. And it's a very powerful message of her spirit and her longevity of her efforts during her life. And
Mhm.
really touched. It makes me want to go bead right now, just to say bye. I'm gonna go.
Oh,
I
yeah,
need
no.
to go try to bead all the things for a horse.
Yeah,
I haven't reached that level.
I think that's what the presence of these people do for us, is that they so for me, what I gather from it is that as I live and I grow, I cycle through these different personalities of people that I've been surrounded by, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and they help me to foster the person that I want to be when I'm their age. And so I have this really focused idea of the kind of elder that I want to be when I'm 70, when I'm 80. And it's a composite of all of these people that I've been surrounded by, and how they not only carried themselves, but how they treated others. And that's something that I really strive for, because I've made mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm constantly striving to be like Grandma Elsie and my grandfather Alex, and the numerous people that even those that are still alive and surround me today. They're not perfect by any means. Who is, right?
Mhm.
But yet they establish for me that perfect person that I'm striving to be eventually one day.
Mhm. It's such a good message, and to think about, what is it that we can do each day to kind of bring something forward. We're in a difficult time right now, and we all need our own self-care and place, but in a lot of ways, some of our self-care is connected so strongly to those elders. And I look for those messages and those texts and those pictures of what people are making, and
Mhm.
hints at what either it's a design my grandma made, or oh wow, that does look like this. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that message being brought forward. Well, that's what I had to share today with everybody.
Yeah.
And I appreciate talking with you so much. We haven't even video chatted at all. My husband's super jealous. He's been circling around here. So we're going to have to get on a family video chat as well. Or
Yeah, I know.
yeah, we just come out here and talk about him. That's the traditional way. No.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I loved this. I loved this one. And I just loved, like, you guys fell into it. You know what I mean? Like,
Holy cow! I
you just,
completely lost,
Yeah,
contact with that. I mean, that was a really good conversation.
that
I
was
hope if
wonderful.
we recorded it, we should just share. It's done.
Do we even need to do it next week?
Take one if that's good. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love this. I just had goosebumps. I mean, so obviously I come from a very, 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 very different cultural background, but mining family photos is something I did as a young kid in my grandmother's living room forever.
Oh,
And I just
awesome.
learned so much about my family. I'm going to cry right now.
Oh,
I love
thank you.
this. I want to thank you guys so much for doing this and going there with us like this. Thank you.
That's awesome.
I'm really touched.
Good feelings. Good feelings. Thank you.
Yeah. And the stories were amazing that you shared. It was so good. Like, and taking the stars to,
Yes.
that was such a beautiful, beautiful
And
thing. Thank you.
landscape, bringing in landscape. And I mean, starting off with JJ's video like that, it's everything. It's like so timely, but it's so in like going back in time, and I don't know. And that connection to landscape. I mean, you guys just, wow. You guys work well together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had good teachers, right, Emily?
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly.
Good. Well, what do you think, Woody? What did we learn from a technical aspect of it? It sounded and looked pretty good.
Yeah, it sounded and looked great. And I mean, even if we want to like use parts of this, if we want to record more, if we want to use parts of this,
yeah.
we can definitely do that.
Cool.
And with the Facebook video, I can just record that separately and add that in.
Mhm.
And then because you guys have your responses to it. I think the only thing I have a question, if we do this again, is do you want the photos up during the whole story, or do you like kind of how long they were up and how they disappeared? Kind of that was a personal thing I was wondering during that about, or personal preference for either of you.
I think that it's okay to have them up there for the duration of, when they need to be there. Like for the asterism of the Big Dipper, it's okay to have it up there for the duration of the time that I'm telling the story. As far as the audio for future, I mean, feel free to, cut and paste this wherever you need to. But there were some places where Emily's audio was it got really fuzzy. Did that come across to everybody else too?
Yeah.
It wasn't fuzzy, but it got really loud and
yeah.
For the like quick seconds that like, because I can essentially I can muffle it to where it won't hurt our ears. It'll just be like distorted for a second, and they were short. So I was going to definitely like deal with that if we were going to use this in any way. Yeah.
Is it because I talk with my hands?
No, it was a weird thing. It was either getting I don't know if do you have earbuds in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might have been combined. Like, I don't know what happened, but it was when you would move closer. I think it was the two mics.
It just got overmodulated.
It did something.
Oh, okay.
I would think it was completely out of your control. I have no idea.
Okay.
But
I'll also be kicking it. I didn't kick everybody off our Wi-Fi now, but I usually also kick people off the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
I didn't notice any. I don't think there were any problems with connectivity at all.
Okay, so it was just mic stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
They were very infrequent too, but when they did, it was pretty loud. But
it was noticeable.
Yeah, but I can deal with that later. Yeah. Other than that, I thought it went really well. Again, I love the family photo section. It's so great.
Yeah.
Just like how many stories are connected to it. And so I was, again, how was, as the speakers, as I was bringing them up, how did it feel to you?
Oh, it was seamless.
Okay.
In my opinion. I mean, the transitions were, barely noticeable. So yeah. So it fit, as far as it fitting into the conversation, it was seamless.
Cool.
And Woody, you should be able to, you have all the audio, so you should be able to just sort of stitch that in, like just fade from one to the other so that it's just really smooth. So you don't see like, okay, now it hit full screen and all that.
Yeah, that's what I can technically cut that out, but leave the audio, and then it'll just transition to it's doable. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like if it didn't feel like it was interrupting the flow or anything. And that's my biggest thing, because all the
what do they say in movies? Just fix that in post.
Yeah, I'll just fix it in post. Cool. So yeah, that was all. I thought it went. I think this is a great. It was amazing.
Yes.
So I think it's really. It'll be cool. I definitely don't want to if we record it again, I don't think we should just throw this out.
No.
Well, what do you all think about we could take we had sort of talked about live streaming, live casting, I guess live streaming on YouTube, like a taped recorded thing, and then following that by a Q&A session afterwards with whoever is included. And that would be like a 3-step process, like test here, record next week, and then on live streaming. Like, what if we use this as the recording thing and then gathered as, for a live stream, at some point? I think we had kind of talked about like the first week in May of doing that, Courtney. I'm just throwing that idea out there. What do you all think?
I'm for it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think once we figure out the live streaming thing, it shouldn't be too bad, and it's just another opportunity to go deeper. And this is really good, at least for this was already a great in-depth conversation, and so this will just be an even better starting off point.
Yeah,
is what I feel. Yeah.
Well, I think that I would want to revisit the agenda items as Emily has them plotted out,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that the flow of that kind of suits me, and I think that what she envisioned is perfect for the flow of conversation. And so now that that I've had the opportunity to articulate the order and the connectivity of it all, I think that the conversation will flow a lot more when we actually do it. I felt really, really happy with what we did today.
Okay. Well, just to clarify, I mean, and because I noticed on the agenda, like, were there things that you didn't touch on that you wanted to? Because I don't want to preclude it. Like, we could
Mhm.
do exactly as we planned. Treat this as a practice run, as good as it was. I mean, it's awesome. But then we could record a for real one next week as planned too. Like, you know,
Sure.
what's your preference?
I'm willing to do it again. I'd be happy to.
Emily, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, our test run was out of the, I mean, we already hit a home run.
Yeah.
A
little bit
we're,
about
we're a little bit of
spontaneity.
overachievers here.
There's so much good spontaneity that I would hate to risk losing that. Like we were really with you
Right.
as you were like, things were coming up for you and you were right there with it. You know, you were so in the moment and it worked so well so many times. I understand like that there could be gains for doing it again, but I would never want to risk losing so much of what we just got to hear.
Yeah,
and
it was,
Totally right.
happen.
I see
Okay,
what
so
you're
that's a
saying.
decision point, whether or not to use this recording and then just streamline like the video and the photo timing and
Right.
things like that. So the decision point is whether to move forward with this recording as the final one or to re-record it. Is that kind of the decision point?
right. And I think the upside is that it's done. You know, it'd take up less of your time, and it was great and wonderful. The downside is that if we do it again, you know, would you feel like as spontaneous? Would it feel as authentic? I'm not too. I mean, I mean, I can understand. It's not going to be the same. I mean, you guys are so good that I would think that, you know, you'd fall into the same kind of, you know, fluidity and spontaneity as you would normally. I mean, it's sort, but we wouldn't want to risk it feeling like rehearsed and practiced and that kind of thing. But what do you guys think about that?
Well, I agree, Colin. I think one of the things that I want to keep in mind is to maintain the spontaneity of today's conversation, but maybe we can just let this evolve
Mm-hmm.
with another conversation and use the best of both.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's going to be edited together, then I don't think that it's going to necessarily. Maybe I'll throw this out more as of a question: is do you think that there might be viewers that are kind of taken aback a bit by the idea that there were two different recordings and you're kind of cycling back and forth between the best of both? I mean, technically, also to pull in Woody on that answer, technically, are there challenges that might be foreseen with both?
With editing it.
With
Like-
editing,
Yeah.
honestly, probably not. They're technically going to be the same file format. So if we go on a technical thing, it's not going to be an issue putting them together. And honestly, how I feel about this thing is I think we're all learning how to watch, like how to view Zoom recordings. So I
Okay.
think it's fine if we're teaching people how to view it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're already in the first few months and like people are starting to like watch previously recorded Zoom meetings or conversations or Q&As and all this stuff. And so we can just be like, this is just like any other video, any other thing we would watch if there were two interviews, two separate days, and the person's wearing a different shirt. I think we can. Honestly, if people are, I'm not too worried about like throwing people off. You know, this is already so new to everyone. So why don't we show them how to do it? That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, we would as planned, record another conversation for real next week. Is that what you're saying, Woody? And
Or
then
they're both real because we're gonna, yeah,
we could stitch them both together.
we could stitch them both together. So we wouldn't try to replicate these talking points, but we would like go further. So maybe, yeah, and like just add on to all of it with the sense of not a test in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one other option, and again, like these are, recording things and having it go so good gives us lots of options. One other option is to use this for a podcast version of the conversation, and then use what we do next week as the sort of the recorded, so that you do have the video consistency. Like that would be the sort of the formal kind of for real, recording of the conversation. And then we would do that third step of a live streaming at some point later.
Is that something we can decide after the second recording,
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
I think that's something we could like really see how it starts to work together. And if they feel like two completely independent conversations, then we could do that, like podcast, video, or, or if they feel like they really do flow together, then let's just do it like it's a documentary where you interviewed someone twice.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like
that happens all the time.
Transition. Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah, I mean, and just so you guys know, we're learning this as we go. I mean, just the other day, we are like, oh, you can live stream on YouTube for free? Really? Now that's the plan.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The target's always moving.
I know. We could also, see what it looks like once if and